Happy Yom Kippur to those of you guys out there who are on the Aviv Barley calendar. Now, I have an exciting announcement, and that is a rabbi in Israel who has been spearheading efforts to revive the Sanhedrin is actually following my accounts. So it would be very interesting if I could secure some kind of peaceful mediation with him and other Orthodox Jews. And I may be preparing a sermon this week as well as a lecture, so please keep me in prayer. And it'll be about the Feast of Tabernacles. If you'd like to tune into that, it'll probably be on YouTube. And now it is more important than ever for me to have the same attitude about Elohim that Ruth had about her husband, Boaz. Ruth said, "Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will go." What about us? Wherever the Spirit of Elohim goes, or wherever the Spirit of Elohim lodges, why don't we go there? Because we need to be Spirit-led. One of the top questions will be, has Mashiach Nagid come? Has the Messiah, our King, arrived? And in Isaiah or Yeshayahu chapter 42 and verse 21, we read that Yehovah is well pleased for his righteousness' sake. He will magnify the law, speaking about the Messiah, and make it honorable. Well, the Christian Jesus does not fit this perspective because they teach a Jesus that is antinomian or anti-law. But the Jesus of the New Testament, if you actually read the New Testament carefully, is the kind of Messiah that was promised in the Hebrew Bible. In Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 through 23, we read a very important message from our King. He says, "Not everyone that says unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that does the will of my Father which is in heaven." Well, what is the will of the Father? It is the commandments. "Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name? And in your name have cast out devils, and in your name done many wonderful works. And then I will profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you that work iniquity." What that means is we never had a relationship. And when it says you that work iniquity, the word in Greek for iniquity there is anomia, which means lawlessness, which means going against the law of Moses. And the reason I know I'm not talking out my backside about this is because in the Septuagint, anomia refers to rebellion against the law of Moses, specifically in the first 5 books. Anomia is directly related to the Greek word nomos, which refers to the law of Moses. Christians will say that this just means some sort of moral code, but there's a verse that refutes this. Example is the Deuteronomy 13 false prophet, whom Yehovah sends to test us and see if we truly love him. Well, it says that that prophet or dreamer of dreams will lead people to not do the Torah of Elohim and will cause people to commit idolatry. And this is the anomia, the rebellion against Yehovah, your Elohim, who brought you, the congregation of Israel, out of Egypt and redeemed you from the land of slavery. If you were a Jew during the 1st century, you believed that Yeshua fit this description. That basically, when he made claims such as before Abraham was, I am, he was leading people astray from the Torah and into a form of idol worship. And when you have people coming at the New Testament from an antinomian polemic, then it's much easier to believe that this was the case. We must also note that when Yeshua talks about the workers of iniquity needing to depart from him, he is directly quoting Psalm chapter 6 and verse 8. So this is a concept that comes from Tanakh. So for Yeshua to rebuke workers of iniquity while himself being a worker of iniquity, this would just be contradictory. In John 1:14, we read that Yeshua is the Word made flesh, and that he tabernacled among us. Well, there are many theories with solid evidence suggesting that Yeshua was born on the Feast of Sukkot, and this would make a lot of sense, given that a lot of the things that we see in the law are prophecies about things to come. So even though now that has been fulfilled from the standpoint of the first scribes of Torah, it had not been. Now, let me be transparent with you. Right now I had several thoughts streaming through my head about what scriptures I wanted to give my exposition on as far as what actually makes sense to teach. But I decided to go back to Matthew 5 and forget those things because in verse 17, when Yeshua says, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets, I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill," he was saying that he wanted to preach it fully. Now, I was talking to a Protestant earlier today doing some peaceful mediation. He had some very important questions for me about how to fulfill the words of God. And the Greek word for fulfill is plerou, which means that Yeshua came to perfect the law. Not in the sense that the jot and tittles were incorrect, but that he was the missing puzzle piece, because the law tells us a lot about the Mashiach. It's funny because anomia not only means rebellion against the law, but it's also a medical condition where people forget to recall words, names, and numbers. And for those who passively disobey the law, it's as if they have forgotten the commandments. Like when God said to remember the Sabbath, that happens to have been a commandment that everybody forgot throughout history. Now, linguistically speaking, there's this idea called false or fake friends. And basically, in English, for example, you might have a word that goes embarrassed, okay? We all know what being embarrassed means. And in Spanish, you have a word called embarazada. Now, embarazada means pregnant. So basically, you have two words that sound very similar in different languages, but have two completely different meanings. And anomia actually really isn't one of those cases, because anomia can mean, essentially, to forget about God's law, to not have it on the center of our minds. And this is how people fall for the false prophets of Deuteronomy chapter 13. And a current application of this is look at all these people prophesying about this so-called rapture that's supposed to happen. Are they speaking the words of Elohim, or are they prophesying out of their own hearts? Sounds like they're prophesying out of their own hearts. Now that's a reference from Jeremiah, which also says that the heart is wickedly deceived. Who can know it? So if you're prophesying out of your wicked heart, you're probably coming up with wicked things to lead the people astray. Now, there are many women out in the world who are walking without a purpose, and that's because the men out in the world are walking without a purpose. Brothers, where is the leadership? Brothers, where is the headship? You know, if you talk to a Jew and they know how to speak Yiddish, they might refer to these women as shiksas. This is a very derogatory term, brothers. What it essentially means is that she has this allure to her. She might be beautiful, but she has no substance. She'll let anyone in. So if you're a youngster watching this, I don't recommend watching this. But basically, she's a harlot. That's what that means. There are a lot of women going around and giving themselves up. Yes, there are some who are very modest, who are very devoted to God. They're out there. Don't lose hope with me saying this. But the point that I'm making is that we live in such an antinomian world that nobody is guided by principles anymore. And of course, there's another Yiddish insult for men, which I'm not going to go over today, but they probably do conceive of a lot of us men who do not obey the Torah, who do not understand the commandments, who will not actually be principled in our lives, who just eat whatever trash comes our way. Yeah, we're probably conceived of as that. So, as I discussed previously, Yehovah knows how to nacham. What that means is sometimes there are things that he allows to happen which he regrets, but it's not the same as teshuvah. There's a distinction between these two words because teshuvah is exclusively the human process of turning away from sin. Yehovah can nacham, so he can change his mind in that way, but he cannot change his mind in the way of making teshuvah, because teshuvah would mean, according to the shuv part of that word, that Yehovah would be pushing away from his sin. And we know that he doesn't sin, so he wouldn't be doing that. It would be humans doing that. If you're truly repentant, you would be pushing away from your sin and not pulling towards it, like a lot of people do. And of course, whether you're a physical tramp or a spiritual tramp, Yehovah wants you to repent. He wants you to push that sin as far away as possible. Imagine your sin being like a wheeled cart that you can just push from one side of the room all the way across to the other side of a room. And if you are looking for a godly man or a godly woman to date within the congregation, give that to Elohim. Present that request to him first. He comes in and he provides for you. He will send you your person. Just make sure you have a mission going for you and you have a purpose in your life that is putting Elohim first. And just so you know, brother, sister, a man or a woman does not owe you a coffee date just because you go to the same congregation as them. You have to be willing to love your neighbor and be relational with them. Shalom, shalom.